I've seen people doing this on TikTok and I want to be one of the cool kids, so I'm also going to do it. But on YouTube. Oh, I should have done it on TikTok to be cool. Hey there, creepy peeps. My name is Nightmare Maven. Welcome back to my channel. Like I said, I did get this video idea from TikTok, specifically from Mandy's Morgue of Horror. So I'm gonna link her TikTok and her YouTube channel in the description because you should definitely be following her if you're not already. But she did a video on the horror movies that made her into the horror fan she is today. And I thought I would do the same thing because it sounded fun. And I think this list will end up being at least slightly different from like my all-time favorites. Purposely going to avoid talking about movies like Scream and Trick or Treat, which definitely made me into the horror fan I am today, but I think you guys get it already. I love those movies. I don't need to go on about them in every single video. And I think I'm gonna throw in some like horror adjacent TV shows too, just for some spice. But I have to mention Sleepy Hollow first and foremost. I think this is my first actual horror movie ever. Not the first movie to scare me ever, but my first scary movie. I know you guys understand the difference. This was the first time I can remember being in awe of a movie, like just based on how it looked. Yes, it had its scary moments for sure. There are some pretty gruesome moments in that movie, but the aesthetics. I wanted to live in Sleepy Hollow so badly after I saw this movie. Like I saw this and I was like, I'm gonna make this my entire personality. I'm convinced this movie did have a hand in awakening my dead little heart. And especially since my mom read Edgar Allan Poe to me growing up, I feel like the look of Sleepy Hollow felt very much like an Edgar Allan Poe story to me. I know the story is written by a completely different person, but I feel like it spoke to me in that sense. Like I was like, oh, I love this. I love everything about this. I also have to mention House of Wax from 2005. I fully admit, but don't condone for legal reasons, that I snuck into this movie. It was my very first R-rated movie in theaters, and in 2005, I was not old enough to go see a R-rated movie by myself. Like my memory of that time is not really of watching the movie per se, but it was the audience. I just remember people having so much fun in that theater. People were cheering, they were screaming, they were reacting to what was happening on the screen, because social media wasn't really a thing back then. Like I think Facebook and MySpace were literally in their infancy in 2005. This was my first experience of being around other people who loved horror as much as I did. And seeing everybody have so much fun in being scared and watching something gruesome just really like had such a hand in making me the horror fan I am today. It made me feel less alone for liking weird and scary things. Another one I have to mention is The Witch, because even modern horror movies can still shape us no matter how old we are. I think this was probably one of the first movies maybe to kind of kick off the like elevated horror trend, and I'm not saying I subscribe to that label. I don't really like that term. However, this was definitely the first or one of the first artsy horror movies I'd ever seen, because most of my horror watches up until that time had been like a lot of slashers, jump scare fest, that sort of thing. And I hadn't experienced too many movies at that point that just elicited pure dread without being in your face scary. The whole time I was watching that movie in the theater, like I simultaneously wanted to hide behind my hands and like just like hide and not look at the screen, but I also couldn't look away. And at the time I could scarcely think of a movie that had done that for me without being riddled with jump scares. So it definitely opened my eyes to like, oh, this is also a kind of horror movie too. I really enjoy this. I need more of this. Okay, for the next one, y'all knew this was coming. Jennifer's Body. Was it a gay awakening? Definitely was part of it for sure. It was certainly a step up from the WLW representation I had seen up until that point, which mostly consisted of me waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and like a Girls Gone Wild infomercial being on TV. Jennifer's Body was, I think, maybe the first time I had seen two ladies kissing in media, and I didn't feel icky about it. And it wouldn't be until much later on that I learned like what the male gaze is and why previous examples of this made me feel a little bit weird. It was also one of the first times I can remember seeing femme presenting characters like in horror not being overly sexualized. Jennifer and Needy felt like people that I went to high school with, in the way they dressed, in the way they acted, felt seen by a horror movie. Because even back when Jennifer's Body came out, it was still very much the narrative that only cishet teenage white boys were like 100% of the audience for horror. That was the stereotype, I guess. This movie made me feel seen. I felt like, oh, this is a movie for me. This one maybe has a negative connotation, but I feel like it's worth sharing and talking about. It definitely shaped some of my opinions on horror and made me who I am today, and that is the Last House on the Left remake. I'll set this one up a little bit. Back in the day, Movie Stop was a thing. They had some new DVDs, but it was mostly a bunch of used DVDs. And it's responsible for the majority of the collection you see behind me. So my friends and I would go there frequently, and I'd buy like 2 or 3 cheap horror movies. We'd load up on snacks, and then we'd come back to my house and have a movie night, and it was awesome. So one day we decided on The Last House on the Left. I hadn't seen the original. Nobody else had seen the original, so we were going into this one completely blind. This movie was so violent, particularly the rape scene. I remember there being a good number of us at this movie night. Like I think there was like 7 or 8 kids at my house, and we were all completely silent. Everyone was just like frozen in horror. It definitely was a like harsh reminder of how violent horror movies can be towards women, people of color, anyone different. It's kind of like, wow, this sucks. The revenge part was great. And I didn't like what we had to sit through to get there. This day, I do not like rape revenge horror movies at all, with only like 2 exceptions so far that I've seen, because they're created by women and they hit different, and I have a video on that and I'll link it up here. So aside from shows like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, which obviously helped make me into the horror fan I am today, especially the latter, there are episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark that I still think about. I remember having trouble sleeping as a kid after watching certain episodes, but one in particular that I have to mention is Courage the Cowardly Dog. Looking back, I truly question whether this should have been intended for children. I love that I had this show as a kid. If I had no prior knowledge of it and I watched it now, I probably wouldn't guess it was for children. There were some really grotesque and just strange and disturbing imagery in this show, but it was sold in such a silly way because of Courage's reaction to everything. I think this show was like the true foundation of my love for horror, because I had fun watching these really unsettling things. Like I watch episodes back now and I'm like horrified. or maybe, you know what, maybe it did do irreversible mental damage that I just haven't discovered yet. And finally, at least for this video, I could probably do at least another part of this. If you want more, let me know in the comments. But for this video, I'll wrap it up with The Strangers. I've told this story before. I'll say the quick version in case you're new here. I watched this by myself one weekend when I was like 17 or 18 years old. My parents were out of town with my brother, so I truly had the house to myself for an entire weekend. And I thought I was tough shit, so I rented this movie. And it was my very first home invasion movie that I can remember. I just imagine like one of the, you know, like in a video game where like a little pop-up came up, was like, new fear unlocked. And this became a subgenre, home invasion, that still is one of the scariest subgenres of horror to me, because I'm truly a homebody. I watch haunted house movies and I watch home invasion movies, but they scare me so badly because I am so terrified of anything that would make me feel uncomfortable or unsafe in my own home. I was so traumatized by this movie. I turned on every single light in the house, and I mean every single light in the house. I triple checked the locks. I checked in every single closet, checked under every single bed. I feel pretty brave for having done that, at least. But you know what? The next day, I was completely buzzed about how awesome the movie was. And it was still a movie that terrified me, but I had fun. And it turns out it was the start of me realizing that that is the beauty of horror and what makes horror so appealing, because you get like, you know, that adrenaline rush for facing a fear in a controlled environment. Like I said, I could probably make a part 2 to this, maybe a part 3. If you would like to see that, let me know in the comments. And please share some of the horror movies that made you in the comments. I love reading your guys' stories also. If you liked this video, if you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new here. Become a creepy peep today. I will see you very soon with a new video. Until then, stay strange. Bye.